All right. Hello. Welcome back to D-Pod, everybody. So we are continuing our basics series, and today we're hitting on the topic of Paul and Timothy relationships. And here in the studio, we have Agape, Marie, and Jeanette.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Yo, yo.
Hello. Welcome back. Welcome back to the studio. So, have you guys been listening to D-Pod?
Yeah. Yeah.
I confess I haven't listened to the last few. Or actually, I don't even know how many more there are.
What's the last episode you listened
I
to?
can't remember.
I think last one I listened to was the one that Ben, Amy, and Nicholas were on.
The Word of God one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's the last episode.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, you guys are all caught up. Wow.
I didn't know that episode existed.
Wow. Agape is just a faithful contributor to D-Pod.
I guess so.
Yeah, but not a listener. I see. Well, I'll have to figure out how to get you onto the listening train. Maybe we'll have more like episodes about gaming or something. Then maybe you'll listen to it. Anyways, all right. So today we're going to talk about Paul and Timothy relationships, right? So that's obviously referring to the relationship between Apostle Paul and Timothy. And that's not a term that we usually use at our church to refer to the kind of relationship we're talking about today, which is basically just kind of mentor-mentee relationships, or kind of the relationship that a disciple would have with their spiritual leader, who is kind of guiding them along this journey. So at least that's what I'm trying to refer to. But like the Paul-Timothy relationship, that's something I heard of recently. Someone kind of referred to that relationship in that way, and I thought that made a lot of sense, kind of from a biblical framework. So what comes to mind for all of you when we say Paul and Timothy relationships?
I think one that comes to mind is I think Paul really loves Timothy. Like, he's always checking in, I hope Timothy is doing well. Like, he's a precious beloved brother to me. He's checking in on how I forgot how his digestive system is doing in one of the letters. Yeah. So just not only just focusing on, hey, are you doing A, B, C, D in the church, but actually cares about their whole well-roundedness and sees them kind of like a big bro, little bro relationship and dynamic. You can just tell through the letters that Paul really loves Timothy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar, and thinking about how one of Paul's last letters was to Timothy, and in that letter he talks a lot about what it means to lead a church and how to grow up into a person that can be a respectable Christian, and different things like that. And so, and I think he draws a lot from his experience and tells Timothy to look at his life. And so it seems like there's a really close relationship that they have, and they know what's going on in each other's lives and what their lives are about. So that's kind of something I was thinking about too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I also think of how Timothy sort of copied, or I guess imitated, different things Paul did, and just looked to him as a role model and example.
Yeah, and I think that just comes to mind for me is how I think Paul takes this younger brother, little bro, like Jeanette was saying, and there's that verse in 1 Timothy 4 where he says, "Let no one despise you for your youth," and he's saying that to Timothy, right? He's trying to raise up this young leader, and he's saying, "Hey, I have a vision for you. I see you becoming the next generation, and you even though you're young, you can set an example for people for what it looks like to faithfully follow Jesus." And like Marie was saying, a lot of how he does that is to tell Timothy, "Hey, imitate me." And Paul said that to many people in a lot of his letters. So yeah, so that's what we're talking about today. So so when I think about that relationship, I was thinking about what's a close analog to maybe what a mentor-mentee relationship within the church looks like. And sometimes we analogize it to like a coach-player relationship, or or a mentor-mentee relationship that you might have outside of church. And so I just want to kind of explore, before we get into maybe the idea of a spiritual leader, what are some other relationships like this that you've had in other contexts, like a coach-player relationship, or someone who mentored you and kind of, in some area. Could you tell us some stories about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can start. So the first person that comes to mind is my academic decathlon coach. And so I guess his role as a coach is to make sure that, well, I guess a little bit more context, academic decathlon, it's a sport for nerds. Basically, you study.
I was shocked when you said sport.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Oh, okay.
All we're doing is studying, and we're practicing, engaging our minds, the muscle of our minds or brains, right? And then we have a test, and one day where we lay it all out, and then we have to perform, right? So anyway, so that's the context, and then my coach, his name was Mr. Armstrong, and what he does, it's an interesting name. But he gave us all the material. He like kind of paved the road for us to make sure we have a good space to study and different things like that. But for me, it was a lot more personal because during that period of time, my parents had split, and I didn't really have a male father figure or a male adult figure in my life. And so he kind of became that person for me. And so it wasn't just in decathlon that he was kind of coaching and mentoring me, but it was a lot of life things as well. And like even like trying to figure out what my classwork is going to be like, or like going to college and making sure I have financial aid or scholarships and different things like that. So that was a huge like coach mentor figure in my life in high school.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like for you, like Mr. Armstrong not only played the coach role for academic decathlon, but kind of other areas of life and just cared for you as a person. Yeah. So it got maybe even more involved in the particular thing that kind of initially started your relationship, right? So that's cool. Okay. How about the others?
Yeah, for me, one person who comes to mind is my dance instructor, Miss Barrios. While I would dance, she would give immediate feedback of like, oh, you're not fully going into the drop, or even like little things like how much you point your toes and stuff like that. Even though it was kind of, I guess, embarrassing at first when she would point out different things, like she helped me grow and like become a better dancer overall. That's one person I think of.
So what do you think, like, what made her a good coach or a good mentor? What would you say?
Yeah, she kind of just told it like it was, like how she saw it. She wasn't someone who like sugarcoats things, but at the same time, like off the dance floor, she would give us different words of encouragement and tell us to keep going and keep being creative in our own choreography. So then there was sort of a balance of, she was very blunt on the dance floor, but then she was also still like human and like someone to relate to off the dance floor. So that's a way that she was kind of like a mentor towards me.
How old were you when you were doing dance with this?
I did it freshman through senior year of high school.
Oh, high school.
Yeah.
So as a high schooler, like when you got that like blunt kind of immediate feedback about whatever, I don't know what words to use to describe dance, the form
critiques,
or something, critiques that you were receiving. Like how did you receive that at the time? Like, is this sort of more like after the fact you think about it that way, or like how did you receive it in the moment?
Yeah, in the moment it was embarrassing at first because like the first few times I was like surrounded by other dancers who had more experience than me. So then I was very tempted to like compare myself to them. But then I realized after a while, like she was pointing out my form so I could just be as good as them. So then it was more of a thing of like, oh, wow, she's trying to grow me in the process. So then I was able to kind of like take it like not so dramatically or not so like in a scared kind of way that I did in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess because she's there for a very particular reason, right, with the whole dance. So then like the feedback makes sense. Like, you're sort of like, okay, well, I'm here for this. So it makes sense. And I guess you also know that if she's blunt, then at least you know that she's holding nothing back. Like you sort of what you see is what you get, which is kind of nice sometimes. So you know where you stand with her. Oh, that's okay. So, or how about you, Jeanette?
Yeah. One thought that came to mind, it's not too serious of a coach, what's it called? Coach-player relationship is actually in 6th grade. I wanted to be on a basketball team and there was no coach that was available. So my dad said, okay, like I'll become your coach then. And then during that experience in 6th grade, that was the first time I learned how to cast vision. So like my dad tried to pave the way for me and say like, what do you want from this season? And I said, I want to play on the team. And then it's funny, at that time, there was only me and one other girl on the team. So I was like, okay, you cast the vision. But now, in order to get that vision, we need people. So he actually trained me how to recruit people. He got other teachers involved, like PE teachers, and said, oh, if you join the basketball team, you get extra credit if you're a girl joining this specific squad. And so we got enough players. So then once we hit that, then my dad said, oh, actually, instead of just being on a basketball team, I think we could win this whole thing. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, like if we do A, B, C, D, E, we can get there. And so he kind of like painted the road for me. He helped me believe too, like, oh, actually with these players, we could actually get there, but how is this going to work? And my dad said it's only going to work if we work together and we can motivate the other players. So that ranged from collaborating, like teamwork. How do we motivate other players that are kind of like on the edge? And then we try to incorporate them in practices more. Or like, okay, we really suck in like certain abilities, like that would be dribbling or shooting or passing. And then my dad and I would watch videos together, come up with drills, and then like, and then teach them as the team. So there's like those aspects, but then also like, there's certain, like I was 12 or 11. So I'm not the most mature person. So there's certain times during, practices where I either threw a tantrum or like did something really immature, but because he's my dad, he took when we would drive home, he said, hey, like that was really immature of you to do. It actually dragged down the whole team, and let's think about why you did that. And I'll be like, oh no, what did I do? But then it was really growing, and just like whenever we had those talks, not that I wouldn't do the same immature thing again, but it helped me see like, oh, if I act a certain way, it actually affects so many other people. And I do want to grow into the position that my dad envisions me to be.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting that your dad was both your dad and the coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole thing to explore there. But maybe that's actually like in some ways more that kind of fits in with maybe what we're going to talk about with spiritual leaders, because it's sort of yeah. So anyways, that's just kind of a brain hiccup on my part. But yeah, that's very interesting. So okay, so each of you talked about these different areas, and yeah, and they're all like in some area of like sport or dance or academic decathlon, like so. So okay, like in that situation, I think we all understand that you need a coach, right? Or you need someone who's more experienced, who can motivate you, keep you accountable, give you feedback. I mean, all of this is really important because you're learning something very specific, and you're trying to perform in something very specific. And then you come to appreciate the role of the coach in your life. So I mean, I think we all get that. So then what is it about, let's kind of bring it back to spiritual leaders. Okay, so what is it about Christian life such that we would need that kind of figure in our lives? Like why does Timothy need Paul? Because I think the reality is that I don't know if a lot of Christians like see their need for that, or like, I know a lot of Christians do, and that's actually what's taught in a lot of churches. I've heard a lot of pastors talk about this. But when I maybe talk to an individual Christian and ask them, hey, okay, so do you have a Christian mentor in your life who's able to coach you and kind of take you to the next step of discipleship? Like, I do feel like some people would not know what I'm talking about. So what are your guys' thoughts on this? Like, what is it about Christian life such that we would maybe need a coach or someone like a coach?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because when I think about my own life, in high school, that's when I kind of really wanted to try and live out my Christian life. And I was at this youth group that had a pastor and kind of a revolving door of staff or mentors that came through. But largely, I felt like I kind of lost and not sure how to live Christian life. And I just tried to figure it out on my own. And for me, I actually, looking back, I really would have appreciated like having a mentor in my life. But at the time, I didn't know like something like that could exist, or that anyone would want to be that kind of role in my life. So I guess for me, it was hard to just even imagine that like that's something that could happen in Christian life. But I guess to your question, like, Christian life is difficult. There's a lot of things like we're sinners, we're broken sinners, and like trying to figure out how to obey Jesus and go against our like default settings is incredibly difficult. So we need encouragement, we need correction, we need feedback, we need someone to pave the path before us and help us to keep going. We need an example. So I guess for me, I feel like one of the main reasons about Christian life and why we need a coach is it's because Christian life is difficult.
Yeah, I think thinking too like let's say when you have coaches in other realms, you're hoping that they can see where you can grow and where your blind spots are. And I feel like even more so, similar to what Agape said, in your character, like especially as sinners, like there's ways that I sin, like there's like certain sins that I have, like let's say anger or wanting control or whatnot, that I'm just naturally blind to. But to someone who's just watching my life, it's really obvious. But there's also a mixture of really obvious, but doesn't like even saying it in the correct way, saying it in a way that I can receive it well, or giving me guidance on how to navigate through that path is something that I know I personally can't do on my own, and I need someone who's a little bit wiser, a little bit more mature to guide me through that.
But why? So, but what is it about, like, yeah, because both of you kind of pointed to, like, yeah, you know, like Christian life is hard. It's, you know, and then, yeah, we're sinners. Like theologically, we all agree with that. And then experientially, we know that. But like, what is it about Christian life that requires, like, why do you need that person? Like I don't see how that follows necessarily. Yes, I'm just trying to like pick at it a little bit. So like, yeah, so okay, yeah, I mean we're sinners, but isn't that what the gospel's for, right? Like the gospel tells us that we can't meet God's standard, right? That's exactly why Jesus had to die on the cross for us. So then we're covered, right? We're covered, right? And we're considered righteous before God. We're clothed with Jesus Christ. So then. Like, so then aren't we good? Like, do you get what I'm saying? So I'm just trying to see where does the need for someone like a spiritual mentor, where does that come in? And I don't see how it follows from just the fact that we're sinners.
I see. I guess I think of it kind of like I'm broken in these ways. I want to stop sinning, not necessarily stop sinning in certain ways, just like so I can be a better person. But if I'm trying to strive for God's heart and I want to get there, but I can't get there myself, I need help along the way. So maybe that's a better way of describing it.
So the person I was describing earlier who would say like, oh, I don't really understand like why I need a spiritual mentor. Like what would be different between your understanding of living out Christian life and that person's understanding of Christian life? I think maybe that's what I'm trying to get at with this question. Because you can, like, you know, I guess we could keep asserting, like, from your experience, you feel like you need it, but try to help the person who doesn't feel that understand why they would need a mentor in their life.
I see.
That's a great question.
Well, it's kind of like
You should just throw it back at me. Like, well, yeah, why, DP? Why do you think?
because I don't know. It's one of those. It's not necessarily like you need. Not necessarily like you need it in Christian life. Like what I mean by that is, if you're saved, then like in theory you don't like need it anymore. But at the same time, I'm also thinking like for a basketball player, like yeah, you don't technically need a coach in order to play basketball, but at the same time you're not going to grow. So but I don't know how to put that more into words.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So let me pick out that word grow, right? Because you're saying that, so you know, the basketball player needs to learn to grow. I mean, you can learn basketball and like, oh, you might know how to like dribble the ball. Okay, that's nice. But like, okay, are you going to stay at that level, or do you want to grow? And so then you seem to be implying that Christian life also involves a sort of growth, right? So could we talk about that a little bit? Like, in what way does Christian life involve growth? And like with growth, I guess it's the idea of maturity, right? So like, talk to me a little bit about that.
Like what I'm thinking about is I'm trying to think you naturally need to grow if you have more relationships in your life. So let's say once I became Christian, I could only like care about the certain people that are around me, which means like when you do life with people, certain things that you do are going to annoy them. And if you actually do want to maintain relationships with them because you're brothers and sisters in Christ, you have to deal with I had to deal with my sin issues. And then once it got a little bigger, like let's say I became a member of my church and I got more responsibilities, then there were other character issues that came into play. So in that sense, I needed to keep growing because the relationships that I was around also got bigger as well. But
So I think what you're citing is because as a Christian you will often live in community, right? If you try to obey Jesus' commands, then not growing is going to lead to certain kind of repercussions and consequences. Yeah, so I can see that. Now, if I were to again play devil's advocate one more time, and so what if you're you get saved and you're like a really like you're from a really pagan community, and you yourself got saved, and the people that you're with, and you don't have access to a Christian community, right? Other like holy believers, like it's just you somehow got saved, and but then all the people around you, they're so much more pagan and so much more like just worse than you, like morally, that like that struggle doesn't exist actually. Like you're just a blessing to everyone around you, but then like I guess so then would that negate the need for? So I'm just kind of just really trying to put your theory to the test here. So would that negate a need for a mentor or like a coach in your life? Anyone can step in.
I feel like if it was just maybe that area where it's the community aspect of it, then maybe. But I think Christian life involves more than just relationships, right? So the thing I was thinking about was like trying to give like full lordship of my life to Jesus. And there's going to be ways, like as I get older, different things happen or different things that come into my life, and I'm not going to know how to like surrender that to Jesus. And like, what does Jesus say about like my job, for example, versus like when I was a student, what Jesus would say about like how I should be a student. And I can try to figure it out on my own, but it's fairly difficult because it's my first time like working or something like that. But so then I think it would be necessary to have someone older who's been in that position or who's has more wisdom to speak into my life and kind of show me or illuminate like what it looks like to give lordship in that area or these new areas as I get older. So that's kind of something else I was thinking about.
Yeah. I think for me, what it comes down to is that what we are called to is a really high standard, right? So, I kind of, earlier I was talking about, we received the gospel, we're all saved, and that means we're justified, we're righteous before God. Like that's all true, right? But we all know that as a result of that, what God calls us to is to become more like him. And so if my standard is Jesus, right? And this is where I was kind of picking at Jeanette's answer a little bit, right? Like my standard is not how much conflict I bring about to my current context, right? My standard is Jesus, right? And no matter what context I'm in. And I know I'm nothing like Jesus. Right? So then that gap, right, is what God's trying to do in my life for the rest of my life until I meet him in heaven. And that's a wonderful journey. It's a difficult journey. It's a really rewarding journey. And it's something that you look back not days after and say I was transformed, but years and decades after. Right. And this tomorrow for Sunday service, I'm going to preach on Philippians 1. And, it says that he who began a good work in us is going to carry it on to completion till the day of Christ Jesus our Lord. And so that journey is there for every believer. Now, I don't think that a mentor is required, right? So if we had more time, I can have fun with this all day. I was going to keep picking at your guys' answers, and I was going to be like, well, what if you're on a deserted island and you don't have any mentors and you're the oldest one there and you're the most experienced? What do you do then, right? So then you go to Scripture, right? I mean, I think ultimately Scripture, the witness of the Holy Spirit, I think that's ultimately what guides us, right? Now, if you have access to a mentor who's able to speak into the situations you've been in, and then like Jeanette mentioned earlier, like who's able to see you more objectively than maybe we see ourselves and provide that kind of feedback, like the dance instructor who's able to see like, oh, you're doing that wrong, right? Because she has a lot more experience. That could save you years. It could save you years. Like it's so much easier when someone like is able to speak into that and you have that kind of relationship in which they have access to you so that they can see it and speak into it, and then you have the relationship with them such that you can receive that, right? And that is such a blessing when we have that. I think that's what we're trying to say. So I think we see that as a blessing when we really care about some trade, some skill like basketball. And I think we need to see Christian life as the kind of thing that actually we need to keep growing in because we're trying to become like Jesus. And having someone to help you on that journey, that's only a blessing, right? And the more people that you can involve in that process. And so one of the things that I've really appreciated, because I have touch point with the Send Network, because I'm technically a Send Network planter as well. And for people who know, like Send Network is it's part of the denomination that we're part of, but they're a church planting network. And so I meet with various guys from this network, and one of the things they'll always ask us is like, hey, do you have someone in your life who's mentoring you? And because they know that we're church planters, and so they want to know like, okay, like even as a church planter leading your church, do you have someone who's mentoring you, right? And when I tell them, oh yeah, I actually have a pastoral couple who actually they've known me since I was an undergrad, and they meet with me once a week. They check in on our marriage, check in on how things are going, how we're doing mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And they're always like so shocked. They're like, wow, and do you guys meet how often? Oh, weekly. Wow. Right. So then like for them, that's awesome. And it reminded me that what I have is awesome because, and I think Agape alluded to this earlier, like to have someone who's willing to spend that time with you, right? It's not just finding the person, but like finding someone who not only has the wisdom, but has the availability and the commitment to you to be able to do that. So anyway, starting with this kind of thesis statement that, yeah, having a mentor in Christian life, I think is a huge blessing, and it can really, really help us in our pursuit to grow and become more like Jesus. So now, having said that, I think there's a lot about the kind of relationship that ends up becoming, as well as the culture that we're in, kind of the cultural moment that we're in, where people are sort of suspicious of institutions, suspicious of authority, suspicious of other people, right? The need for authenticity in all things, like you need to like generate everything about your life from your own heart. Like these different things I think that we start to detect in our culture. I think that makes it hard for people to want or really kind of dive into these kinds of mentor-mentee relationships, especially when it comes to Christian life. So how have you guys seen that play out? Like what do you think are some obstacles that people have to entering into these mentor-mentee relationships?
Well, I think one of them is obvious trust or specifically truth issues. Like for me, growing up, I trusted my parents like pretty confidently. But then when it comes to any extended family member or any other adult in my life, when they give an opinion, I'm like, who are you though? Like, how do I know like what you believe is actually accurate or objectively true to my situation? So like it can turn. So a lot of the time is like also thinking about like, are they thinking about are like caring for me, or are they trying to just give this advice to me to fulfill some other advantage that they have? Like, especially before I was Christian, I grew up thinking the world is just very like, you need to protect yourself from other people kind of thing. So if anyone's like, no one's really friendly or like kind, why would people do that? So normally when people give advice or their opinions, I think this is only to help them. It's not to actually help me, because we don't live in that kind of world. At least that's what I thought when I was atheist.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's a big issue, right? Like how do I know I can trust this person? How do I know that they have my best interest in mind? That's I think that is a big question mark. For people. And I think the short answer to how we would know that is if the person giving you advice lives an open life, if you know how they live, and they have consistently shown you care over time. When it comes to Christian life, right? Like those would be some of the things. Like, do they live sacrificially? Do they seem to obey God in other areas of their life? Like, I mean, there's ways to get around that, but that is a big, that is a big hurdle, I think.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about was the authenticity issue or thing, and that's something that I can resonate with as well. Like, I guess I'm imagining like if someone tells me what to do or kind of coaches me in a certain way, then somehow that takes away from what I'm trying to do, or it makes it less real or less authentic. And kind of a silly example that I can think of is if like, growing up, my mom would tell me to like do something, take out the trash. I remember there was this one instance where I was moving towards the trash can before she said anything. I was going to grab the trash and she told me, hey, can you take out the trash? And then I was like, no, because that took away from my like own volition, right? And so now I'm just obeying my mom, and it's not me doing it because I want to help, right? So I wonder if that's part of it. Like, if people feel like if someone's coaching me on how to be a Christian, then my love for Jesus is not as authentic. Or like if someone tells me how to do this, then well, I didn't figure it out, so it takes away from that. And so maybe that's kind of a big barrier to having a mentor.
Yes, somehow it's better if you generated it all by yourself. Yeah. I wonder if does that dynamic play out in your and Marie's?
Yeah.
But yeah, this is not the marriage episode, right? So
I was fully resonating
yeah.
with what Agape said.
but with your husband or
No comment.
this is becoming the marriage episode right now. So we will steer away from this. Okay, steering away. All right. So yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that is a big one too, though. Yeah, I definitely personally resonate with that too. Yeah, with my wife too. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add was, maybe one barrier is just not wanting to hear truth. I think a lot of the times in Christian life, everyone has some degree of self-awareness of like what their sin issue is or what their character issue is. And if you bring a mentor into that, then I think there's like this fear of like, oh, I'm going to kind of like be like called out or pointed out. And maybe like the person doesn't want that and just wants to I guess hear what they want to hear and like be affirmed with how they're like feeling about a certain like conflict or situation, but not wanting to hear like, an outside perspective of like, maybe you could be wrong, or maybe, consider the other person you're involved in the conflict with and stuff. And so I think in that way, it's like kind of like a dislike or not wanting to move towards truth could be a barrier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always scary to open yourself up to feedback. That's part of, that's not all of the mentor-mentee relationship, but that is a significant part of it, because you're asking them, okay, so what can I do differently, right? And I don't think any of us find that to be like a really exciting dopamine, like injecting kind of a situation when someone tells us, oh, maybe you shouldn't do it like that. So yeah, just me saying that made Jeanette shrink right now. Oh man, that's so funny. All right, so okay, as you kind of think about like, so we talked about like, in our generation, what makes it hard for people, but is there anything else that comes to mind? Like just maybe for yourself personally, as you worked out your relationship with your mentors over the years?
Yeah, for me, the thing that I think it's actually the most difficult thing about my relationship with my mentors is that I'm afraid that I will be condemned because generally it's because I have some sin issue, or I feel like I need to confess or come into the light about something. And I'm afraid that like my leaders will tell me, hey, like, wow, you really failed there, or like, wow, you are beyond hope, or and actually a lot of these thoughts are the thoughts that I have myself towards myself. And so I think I project that onto my mentors and feel like that's what they're going to say to me. And so it makes me terrified to even try and talk to them in a one-on-one situation. And but over the years, I've actually never experienced that. And generally what I've experienced is like a lot of compassion and a lot of care and love and forgiveness, and even like a raising up of me and like vision casting for me, even though I feel like I'm so worthless, or like I feel like there's nothing for me. My mentors have always thought, well, God can actually do something in my life, that God can redeem my life. So yeah, I guess it's been hard, and I think over the years it's gotten a lot easier. But I would say that's one of the hardest things about having a mentor.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Because I do think the projection thing is interesting, because I think sometimes we project our fears or kind of what we think about ourselves onto kind of the person in the position of authority. Because people do that to God too, right? Like, oh, God must hate me, right? And it's like essentially because we hate ourselves, or we're just really unhappy about something that's happening in our lives. And then I think we can do the same thing. I mean, we do that to our parents, and we do that. So I can see us doing that to our spiritual mentors too, right? And I've definitely done that with my mentors. And what helped me over the years has been just through conversation, recognizing that I'm very inconsistent at predicting what my leaders are going to say to me.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. So whatever I think it is probably not going to be that. It's sort of like what I've come to learn over the years, and kind of allowing them to have the dignity of them as a person, as a separate person from me, saying what they want to say, right? Instead of me trying to guess like what they would say, right? And so, yeah, so that's kind of helped me over the years. So let's talk about like, okay, so we talked about some of the difficulties, but let's talk about like the turn for you. Like how have you over time come to understand the importance of mentors in your life, the importance of having these kind of Apostle Paul-like figures, And then maybe like how do you feel about that dynamic nowadays? Like how have you kind of come to appreciate or understand the role of a mentor in your life?
For some reason, one thing that came to mind was explosions that I would have with either roommates, friends, or I guess roommates, like current roommate right now. So like, let's say for example,
Oh, I just understood that. Oh, wow, it's getting vulnerable really fast. All
like
right.
I think particularly in college, I didn't have too many like issues with my roommates because I had 4 at the time. But I remember once I graduated, I started, especially like I think COVID hit. So then you just see certain people like all the time. And then there were situations where I just was not understanding the person properly, or I just couldn't figure out like how could she and I get along. So I would ask advice to my mentor. So kind of like out of desperation, like I don't know what to do. Like I need help. And then she was more than happy just to sit, listen, and like, hey, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? How are you feeling? And then just even if my situation didn't necessarily get better, just having like a third party to talk to, and they even got to say like how I was acting a bit crazy or not. How do I put it? Like I'm not seeing everything correctly because she knows both of us pretty well. So she also put in like, hey, like, did she really mean it that way, or did it like? Is that really like her, or is that really how she said it to you? And I was like, no. And then she's like, okay, now we have another stepping point to like just think about. Or let's say there's time, like I remember there's a time when Nicholas and we were having certain tensions, and then I just couldn't take it anymore. And then I would like call my mentor. I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, help me. And then she's like, okay. And then so we would like talk about it. So
maybe I should just bring up Nicholas right now. Isn't he downstairs? Yeah. Get the other side of the store. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And it actually is really funny because most of these times when I'm going crazy, he has no idea that I'm actually internally going crazy. So it's So are you okay?
Keep going.
So it was really helpful to talk to her because my mentor knew both of us too. So she was able to paint the picture, see the ways that there's certain stories or phrases that came into my mind that is not accurate. And then she's able to bring me back to reality and help calm me down. And then like later we get to talk to Nicholas about it later and just appease the relationship. So just during those times when certain situations that I have with either different friends or roommates, I'm like, I can't figure this out myself. If I keep doing this, I'm going to dig myself a hole. I need someone to help pull me up. And so that's when I would like call my mentors.
Yeah. And I think you're getting at, one of the kind of real blessings that a mentor can be in your life, which is to, as someone in a position of trust, like, so in like friend dynamics or even husband-wife dynamics, like to have someone who can just kind of mediate like when there's a stalemate, because it might not even be about anything serious. Like it's just like a petty argument, and it's just like you just both see it your own way, right? And you just can't like get out of it. And for someone that you both trust to just listen to both sides of the story and be like, oh, this is silly. Like, just resolve it like this. Oh my gosh. And then you're like, oh yeah, huh. And then you can just like move on with your life suddenly, right? Like that is a huge blessing. So just even specifically with marriage, I guess that keeps coming up. I wasn't intending to make this into that episode, but somehow I guess maybe that's one of the ways in which you experienced mentors being a blessing. So what can I do? It just keeps coming up. Yeah, how about for others? How did that work out for you guys?
For me, well, speaking of blessings, I think one of the biggest ways that I've learned to grow in appreciating my leaders is that they're able to bring me back to the basic truths of the gospel, and to remind me that even though I've failed or I've sinned again, like that I'm forgiven and that I'm loved. And because for me, for the longest time, I couldn't actually become a Christian because I just felt like God couldn't forgive me because I just kept failing and I just kept sinning. And but my leaders and mentors kept reminding me that it doesn't matter how much I've sinned or how much I've failed because Jesus paid the ultimate cost on the cross. And I just need to hear it again and again and again and again. And after a few years, it finally hit me. And I think that's something I'm still growing in, just in all areas of my life, I guess. I just need to keep being reminded of these basic truths. And so, yeah, I think the older I get, the more I see I need people who can speak these kind of truths to me, words of encouragement, because my own voices and thoughts are so negative and so not true, actually. And so, yeah, I think over the years I've grown to see I need leaders to bring me back to the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you're hitting on another really important thing that mentors do for us. And, it's not just our pastors or preachers who bring us the gospel on Sundays. Like it's people in our lives. Like, and friends need to do this for each other. Spouses need to do this for each other. But definitely someone you trust, a mentor in your life can remind you of grace, remind you of the gospel. And especially if they know you really well, like there's a way in which maybe their words hit or their words get applied into our heart, and we're able to believe that once again, in a way that maybe trying to speak that to ourselves even doesn't really work, right? And even you read the words of scripture and you're like, I know this is supposed to be true, but I don't feel it. But then something about like someone you trust coming, praying for you, just saying the exact same thing, like that can be really powerful. I mean, personally, I had that kind of experience even recently. Like we were doing a kind of a small group time with some of the other full-time leads, the pastors in the Midwest, with our new mentor who just took over the region for us, and we're just having a time of sharing and just different struggles or ministry difficulties that we're going through, and at the end, like our mentor just shared really basic gospel truths and just reminded us of who we are and before God. And like, it was nothing like fancy actually, but I just felt like really ministered to. It was like, oh man, I just needed to hear that because like, I know that because I probably told Agape that like last week, right? Like, or something, right? But then like I need someone to say it to me, right? And be like, oh yeah, that's right. I am a beloved child of God, and I just need to hold on and just be faithful. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, something about that is really powerful. And I think it's especially when there's that kind of trust and kind of relationship over time. I think that helps.
Yeah, I think for me, one way I grew to appreciate my mentors, especially in college, I had actually the same mentor all 4 years of college.
Oh yeah, that's not that common.
It's not. These days it's not, but it was a thing. And one thing I appreciated about her, actually, she would, I realized like, oh, mentors are human and just as like sinful as anybody else too. Because even though, she is like, way more ahead of me in life in a way, like she would still own up or like just check in on me if she felt like, oh, did the conversation between her and I end okay? And like, I felt comfortable enough to like bring up the next time I saw her too, if like I felt like our conversations ended on a weird note, and just to like clarify and make sure we were on the same page. And just relationally, I felt so strengthened and grateful that like she would do that, and she was humble enough to not just, I don't know, like say like, oh yeah, it was you or whatever. Like she would own up and say the things that like she could have done differently or the mistakes that she made. So that's one way I grew to appreciate her.
Now, let me ask you this. Like, how do you think your perspective on your mentors has changed now that all of you are sort of in a position where you're like mentoring other people, right? Like, you're reaching out to college students. For those who are non-Christian, you're helping them through, just life, or you're teaching them about the Bible. And then we also have our Christian students, obviously, that we're discipling and that we're all get to be older brothers and sisters too. Has that affected your view on this, or kind of maybe even helped you to reinterpret like some of your undergrad experiences, like when you were maybe at the peak of your like, oh, why do I need a mentor like phase in your life? So just curious if there's anything like that for you.
Yeah. I think one of them is when I was young, growing up, how I view my parents, I realize is how I view my mentors. And then there's still a lot of things that I still need to untangle from those. So like one thing that is that I thought growing up is whatever my parents said that I did wrong, I cannot argue with, or I have to say it's 100% law, like whatever they say is true. And usually, without going into too much detail, I would get very sometimes certain lengthy disciplinary sessions when I was growing up. And then so that was my vision of mentors, or like an older figure that cares for me, is it's going to be like that. And then, but once and then so when I went into college and I had certain mentors, that's how I thought they viewed me. Like they're waiting to collect enough data over the course of a year. So then during a 2-hour or 1-hour session, they can like just go through all the different things that I've done wrong. Because that's kind of like how I grew up. But then now, not that any mentor did that to me in college, but that was just always in the back of my mind. So then once I became a mentor, on the other side, I'm like, oh no, that's definitely not how I view things. Like I don't think my word is law. I'm trying to figure it out too. And a lot of it, instead of coming from like a disciplinary like dictator or tyrant like with a whip kind of thing, my mentality as a mentor is like, oh no, I really care about this person. I don't like their background. Who knows if I actually know their background properly or if they know it themselves. So I see it a lot more as a journey of, I care about you. I want to see where you're going. I want to see where your relationship with God is going and how can I guide you along the way. A lot more like a shepherding mindset, which is funny because the Bible talks about shepherds. It's all coming together. So I guess that's one big thing. It went from a tyrant to someone that's like having a checklist of seeing what you do right and wrong and then needing to like discipline or punish you for it so you would be on the right track, to a shepherding presence that sees you, cares about you, wants to nurture you and grow you in whatever way that will help you grow the most during the college years. So that's one thing that changed for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think about like people in my life that I've really grown to care about. And there's one particular person I'm thinking about. I won't go into too much detail for the sake of privacy, but I saw this person destroying his life and making really poor decisions, and that led to a lot of negative consequences in his life. And I had a lot of heartbreak over that and a lot of anguish. And what I wanted for him was to stop, not simply because he's doing something wrong, but because I just see how much pain he's in. And so, yeah, when I look back on my years as a Christian and having mentors in my life, and I guess I have grown in deeper appreciation for the kind of care and love and concern my mentors have had for me. And I just imagine them seeing me like continuing to fall again, or making poor decisions in my life. And then when I think about those conversations when I confess or and bring these things up, and I remember the kind of concern and care that they've shown me, and I know that behind that is actually a lot of anguish, because they really cared for me, and they really don't want me to be destroying my life or and different things like that. So I think as I think about the people in my life that I've really grown to care about, and as I've kind of been in that mentor role or kind of older person role in their lives, I've grown in a lot of appreciation for the mentors in my life who've really cared for me and poured out for me.
Yeah, I think for me, well, it's kind of fresh because yesterday we had Vanguard Advanced Course 101.
Nice. Shout out to the Vanguard people.
Yes, I'm so proud of them for, whenever I play devil's advocate, that they don't just phrase it up, but they try to have an answer back to the thing that I'm challenging them about. And now that I'm sort of in that like driller role, like I appreciate so much more how when I took Advanced Course 101 and how I was drilled, and in some parts it was kind of hard and disheartening when I had to struggle through to answer those questions. But then it made me kind of have like thicker skin whenever I did like outreach, or even now as I'm trying to like train up these students to be able to also stand up for their faith. So in that way, I appreciate how I guess in the moment, it's not comfortable to even deliver that sometimes, even though it is kind of natural for me. I'll confess that.
Drill Sergeant Marie.
But how that'll it'll like form and shape people to be resilient and to continue carrying on the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're talking about like Course 101 drilling and, kind of, it's sometimes, it's hard even for stuff like that. And then I think about I think back on my college days and a couple of like really crucial conversations that my mentors had with me at really important spiritual junctions in my life. There weren't that many of them. There's like just a couple, like 2 or 3, and I think back on it now, I'm like, wow, that must have taken a lot of courage because. I think in my situation, it's a situation in which all of that ended well because I received it well. Like it caused me to really see myself and kind of the wrong direction I was headed down at that time. And I think my mentor was perhaps the only person who could have spoken into that situation at that moment. The only person who had the relationship with me, who had a view of my life in such a way that they could have come to that conclusion and kind of ask me like, hey, so is this what's happening right now for you? And then for me to like come to that point of realization and like being someone who's now often on the other side of that and, needing to, do everything from bring the gospel to people, remind people of grace to also having those kinds of kind of crucial conversations to cause people, we're going through Jeremiah right now, right? And like for the devotions, and Jeremiah has to have a lot of those kinds of like warning type of conversations as well. And that's part of what a mentor needs to do occasionally. And it just makes me appreciate like, wow, that takes a lot of courage. And because you know that when you have that conversation, it could either go the way it does every time for Jeremiah, which is that the people don't listen, or it could like in my situation, I actually responded positively to that, and it ended up being for my blessing, and then for me now as a parent, I feel that in a whole nother way, like kind of the love I have for my children, and kind of the discipline that I have to give to them, because I have a vision for them, and it's emotionally tiring. It's like I'd much rather just have a good time with my kids instead of like, I have a couple hours with them in the evening and then like I have to spend 30 minutes of that disciplining them, or trying to explain to them like why you shouldn't be selfish towards your younger brother or something like that, right? So like I'd much rather not do that actually, but then I'm the parent. Like I like in that relationship, I'm again uniquely positioned to say that to my daughter, my son. And so if I were to not do that, that would be abdicating something that maybe like God's placed me in the situation to do. And so when I think of like, mentor-mentee relationships that exist, often the mentor finds herself in a position where perhaps you're the only person who can actually deliver this to this person. Mm-hmm. And maybe God's placed you in this situation for that. And I think that's really burdensome, and it ought not to be taken lightly for sure, right? And so, a verse we were talking about earlier, before we started recording this is from Hebrews 13:17, right? And it says, "Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you." And so, so it makes me just think of that. The great burden that a leader, quote unquote leader, a mentor has, because they're keeping watch over your soul. And it says they will have to give an account. So we will have to give an account for how we have mentored people in our lives that God's placed under our care. And that for me as someone in that kind of position, it gives me pause, right? And it reminds me that I have to handle that with a sense of fear and trembling, right? Instead of kind of wielding that in a way that's like flippant or, like it's not a power thing, right? It's not a power. It's like an entrustment that God's given to me. Mm-hmm. So now to end off, let's turn things a little bit more on the practical end. Okay. So do you have any advice for people? Like, so if they want to grow into, maybe they don't have a mentor and they want a mentor, or like they have mentors, but how they want to grow in their relationship with their mentors, like what are things that you would recommend? Like, how can you grow? How have you experienced that? Or on the other side, like what are things that your leaders have done that made that easier for you? So maybe on both ends, let's just talk about some of the practical things that helped you over the years to end off the episode.
Well, I think one that is very effective, but is also kind of scary to do, is approach your mentor and say, hey, is there anything in part, like I want to grow, like make that very clear to your mentor that you're giving them permission to speak into your life and saying, is there anything that you can see right now that I can grow in? Because if it's just an open plane like that, because, mentors are nervous because they don't know like how you're going to receive things, if you even want like certain feedback, because they can probably see a lot of things if they interact with you with a while or see how you are with other people in your life. So if you give them just full on permission, then it takes a lot off of their shoulder, and then it also like you're ready to receive it as well. So that's one practical one. And I think another one too that I think the current older mentor that I have right now, I realize we're not supposed to give names, but
I wonder who this is.
she did this. Well, she was also coincidentally my mentor when I was in college.
Oh, now I really don't know who this is.
What she does really well that I think is give feedback, but not in a really scary, dramatic way. Like certain things, I think it just depends on the context, right? Like if there's a really big sin or really big issue, then you most likely need to take the person like one-on-one onto the side and really talk about it. But a lot with what Kata does, which helps. Wow, I was doing so well.
Redo.
What I think this mentor does really well is she would just bring up certain feedback that's not that big of a, like not that big, but it's also good for me to hear like, oh, she noticed this about me. Okay, maybe I don't know if I 100% agree, but let me think about it some more. And then so she would make maybe certain comments every here and there, not that often, but I really appreciate those times because then it's a way for me to, because I'm really insecure when I get feedback. So it's a way for me to hear it, but it's not that dramatic of a time. And then I get to reflect on it later and think, okay, are there certain ways that I can grow later in this area that she's pointed out to me? So those were two practical things.
I was going to just comment on your first one because you were saying, oh, that mentor probably has like a lot of things that they can tell you because, especially if they've like noticed you. But that might not be the case actually, because actually I've had people ask me that question and I just drew a blank. I'm like, I don't know, dude. So then I might turn it back like, oh, so what do you think you should grow in? I've done that because I like just drew a blank in that moment. So it's not always true that there's like.
That's fair. Yeah. Because I naturally think a mentor knows 100 things that are wrong with my life, but then that's also like my own. Yeah.
I think that's a little bit of maybe projection of yourself going onto the mentor. I've actually that's not been I've had more than a few situations in which someone's just randomly asked me that. Because I guess they hear this kind of advice, and then I'm like, you can come back to me tomorrow. Yeah, or at least takes me a few minutes to think of something. Oh, man.
Yeah, for me, one thing that my mentor did in college that helped me feel more comfortable was actually just bringing me along to do other life stuff. It wasn't even like spiritual stuff. It was just normal everyday stuff, like, picking up the kids from their like elementary school and like shopping with them, and then just naturally just like getting like comfortable and knowing more about like my mentor, and then she got to know a lot about me, kind of helped facilitate a lot of just bonding and that sense of like, oh, okay, I can kind of open my life up a little bit more to this person as they have for me.
So it's just doing life together. So maybe the advice part of that, the other side of that would be to like invite yourself along to like your mentor's life, or kind of like that'll help. Like if you see each other in kind of just life context, right? Besides just formal settings.
Yeah,
right?
And I think that's one thing that like I personally had to kind of get over, because I thought like, oh, I can only go over to people's houses if I'm invited, sort of thing. But then no, like as your mentors, like now being on the flip side, we want you to approach us. We want you to like tag along, and you're always invited, whether or not we verbally say it or not. So yeah, that's one like word of advice.
Yeah. All right.
Wow, you took mine. I think maybe two other things, or maybe just one other thing. No, two things. Okay, so two things. So I think the first thing is to reach out and then like to let your mentors know like you want to talk. And I know that can be really hard and intimidating, but I don't know. In my experience, that's always been a good conversation, and I think the mentors would I think they generally want to know what's going on in your life, and they're happy to talk to you and about anything actually. And it doesn't have to be spiritual things, and it can be anything, right? So that's one thing. And then I think the other thing is if you have something that you need to talk about, but you can't, you find or you're afraid to talk about it in person, send an email. And that's something that I do a lot with DP. Whether it's like something I'm struggling with and I have a hard time like bringing that up, or if it's something like we had a conversation and DP said something that was hard for me to receive or I felt like was a little off. I've sent many emails in the past 4 years together.
Yes, I can attest to this. Yes.
Yeah, but that,
it works though.
It's super helpful for me to write out what I'm feeling and able to identify whatever that is, and then even as I'm writing it, I think my emotions cool down, or I'm actually able to see from DP's side, or maybe something else, and then he responds back and is super helpful, or we have a follow-up conversation. And actually, something I really appreciate about you, DP, is that you actually own up to different things. Or I think actually recently we had a conversation where you said, "Hey, I was a little strong in that," or different things like that. And yeah, actually, that was over winter break. I think. Yeah, we had a long conversation in the car. That was really nice.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I sent a really long email.
Yeah, in the HP parking lot. Yes.
Yeah,
we had a nice conversation.
Yeah, and I really appreciated you owning up to whether it was your tone or different things that you said that you shouldn't have said, or maybe you should have said it in a different way. And so I guess that's a couple of things. So sending an email, and then on the mentor side, actually just owning up to something that kind of may have come across wrong, and not just not blaming the other person. Not that I'm saying that mentors do that, but I think that really helps being able to communicate that to the mentee. So
it's kind of funny because Agape was saying, like, as he writes, sometimes he kind of realize, or he's kind of figuring out his emotions as he writes. And sometimes my experience of when his emails are really long is that it's like two separate emails. It's like it's one email, but it's two emails, because he's starting, and then I sense a turn in the end of the email, and it's like, wait, I'm sometimes like, is it the first half of the email or the second half of the email? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Now that you say it, I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So I'm like, I think he was live processing as he was writing this email.
Well, mentoring works.
So now, and I appreciate that Agape will just bring things up with me like that, and it's really helpful for me too, because sometimes I don't know myself. Like, oh, is that how I came across? Oh shoot. So maybe I'll just end with just some of kind of my thoughts about my relationship with my leaders over the years. And I think one thing that comes to mind is that, it is like we're calling it a Paul and Timothy relationship, and it's this kind of very specific, spiritual mentor relationship. But in the end, it's a relationship, right? It's like any other human relationship. And I think, especially in the church, one of the things we're called to do is to bear one another's burdens. And so when I think about your mentors or people I mentor, one of the things that should happen in that relationship is sort of bearing one another's burdens, kind of being there for each other. And so one of the ways in which I think I bonded with my leaders, my mentors as an undergrad, is that when there were times when I needed help with something, right? When my family needed help with some legal stuff and I didn't know who to go to, I went to my mentors, and they helped get me connected with people, or I needed a housing for a part of the vacation, and so I just asked them if it was possible, and they had me in their home, and that experience was really crucial to me developing relationship with my leaders. And so just being open to asking for help. Sometimes I think asking for help is really hard because we don't want to burden people, but what I realized is that my mentors love they love to help and bear that burden with me. And then this is something that my kind of mentors told me over the years, which I didn't quite put into practice all that much, right? Which I regret now that I'm on the other side of it, which is your mentors are people too who have needs and who need help with various things. And so for me, I'm personally really thankful for all of our staff who are helping us all a lot, just with our kids, with, keeping Greenwood tidy and manageable, since there's a lot of traffic through here. And like we're limited human beings who are, barely trying to learn how to raise 2 kids and lead up a college ministry here in Hyde Park. And like, we don't have everything figured out. And so it really helps us when the staff, they just willingly volunteer for things where they come over and, they watch our kids for a couple hours and things like that. And like, for us, that means a lot, actually. And I think that all helps to contribute to sort of the soil or the context in which we can have a healthy sort of mentor-mentee relationship. And so I guess the advice I would give is to ask for help and to offer help, right? And I think that will, and that's just good advice for any relationship, right? But and it definitely applies to your spiritual mentor relationships as well. All right. Well, is there anything that we haven't said that you guys want to say before we end off any thoughts that you had about this topic that the questions didn't lend itself to you saying? Just open-ended.
Well, I guess because you've seen a couple of generations of people coming from the mentees to the mentors. So let's say Agape and Marie, and then now you're seeing Nicholas and I and the class of 2019. So they're becoming mentors. Is there something I don't know, maybe this is how does that make you feel?
I think it's awesome. I mean, I think for me, that's what's most exciting for me about ministry. It's when, because my experience of my mentors was that they had vision for me higher than I could have had for myself. I never thought that I could be a spiritual leader. It's not that I didn't necessarily have vision for it. I just thought that I'm not that kind of person. But actually, I think part of what my mentors did for me is to show me, actually, you can do this. And anyone can do this, actually. Anyone can be a spiritual influence on someone else's life. I'm not talking about the extent to which you will, or, it's not about how impactful you are, but you can make an impact in somebody's life, right? And so then when I see people catching on to that and starting to see themselves not as merely consumers in the church, or to not just see themselves as people who need to build a career in this life, and you sort of, all those things that we used to live for start to fall away as things that are not as important as carrying on the legacy of gospel preaching and passing that down to the next generation. For me, that's what it's all about. And so then, even for people that I've mentored who are not necessarily at Grace Point anymore, at our church anymore, when I hear about them doing ministry or trying to love people, that really, really just makes me happy. So I don't know. That's sort of my response to that. I think it's awesome. And I hope that I get to raise up many more generations in my lifetime of people who want to be excited to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen. All right. I think that's a good stopping point. All right. Well, outro music. Nice. Well, thanks for joining for our latest episode of D-Pod. We will continue the basics series, and we have a prayer as well as, what's the other one? The peer one. Oh, David and Jonathan relationships.
Wow.
Yeah. And we might think of some other ones as well. All right. But thanks for joining in.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.